Welcome to Chess Whiz TV, episode, I never remember, 56. Today is, I never remember this either, August 23rd, 2014, and we are doing a beginner's lesson today. Free lesson we gave away, yes, says Yoda, a couple of days ago, 2 days ago. We gave away a lesson out of random drawing, and the random winner was someone who'd never seen Chess Whiz TV before. What happened was there was a French tournament going on at the same time as Cool Chess Whiz, and, we got a lot of viewers, and one of them won a free tournament. So let's bring him on air right now. Let me punch the button. Hold on one moment. Clicking the button, doop, and then pressing the other button. Hello, hello.
Hello there.
And your name is?
My name is Hudson.
Welcome to the stream, Hudson.
Thank you very much. So
I was chatting with you a little bit before we went on air, but I've got to ask again for all the viewers, how did you find out about Chess Whiz TV?
Well, just as you said, I was looking at random games on Twitch, and one of them was chess. Because of the French tournament, it was relatively high up on the list, and I was fascinated by the concept that there would be so many people watching chess on Twitch.
It is a mystery. It is a
yes.
mystery.
So I went on there, and the French tournament was incredibly boring, mostly because I understood none of it.
That's so surprising.
Not only was it a complicated game, but the language was awful.
They were speaking French as well?
Yes, exactly.
That makes it even more challenging to watch if you don't speak French.
Yeah, definitely. So I found this stream as the second highest viewed stream, and it was very entertaining to watch. So
2 thumbs up for Chess Whiz. All right.
You had me hooked.
Nice. So if you played much chess before, when did you first learn the moves?
Oh, I really haven't played a whole lot of chess. At a summer camp, not for chess, it was for speech and debate, but we played chess a lot just to pass time. And over these past couple days, since I learned that I was going to be doing this lesson, I've tried to cram as much time as I could in learning how to play chess. So I know a lot more than I used to.
Okay, so this is like the big test for you. You've been studying for 2 days so you can impress me.
Yeah, but I'm afraid that if this were a legitimate test, I would do terribly.
Oh no, there's no failure. There's no, hold on a moment, I gotta click a button over here. There's no way you can really go wrong because I'm such a nice guy.
Oh, well, fantastic. That's great.
I have to change the title of the broadcast. It says lesson giveaway, which is a little bit vague, so I'm changing it to beginner's lesson because this is going to be a beginner's lesson. If you guys are above, say, 1,400, 1,500 in strength, you probably won't pick up too much from today's lesson, just because we're aiming at the beginner levels here. So if you're here to learn deep analysis of chess, then tune into a different episode because this is going to be basic stuff. But hey, you can still watch. We're going to have a good time. So let's jump over to lichess.org. Do you have that webpage open there, Hudson?
Yes, I do, right here.
Okay, let me challenge you. Let me switch the view here. Oh, that was so cool. Play with a friend. So you're visible. You're going to see that on the stream here in a moment.
Oh, okay. I'm very
let's
excited.
give us plenty of time. I'm cranking up the time. And I'm going to give you white so that you can show off your skills so quickly. And we're going to actually just start with a game of chess, and then we'll talk through the moves as we go.
Very good.
To get started. So I've messaged you a link in the chat of the video conferencing call. This is high tech. So if you click that link in the browser, we should be ready to go. There is pin 70. Okay. All right. So you're going to show off your amazing study skills here that you've done for the last 2 days.
Well,
what a brilliant move.
First amazing move.
Did you invent that move? That's so smart.
I unfortunately cannot take credit for quite a few of the moves I'm going to be making.
Oh, really? You've got this whole opening all memorized. Well, this is a very good way to start the opening.
Just been trying a couple different things, I suppose.
Awesome. And have you played a little bit on this website, lichess.org?
Yes, I have. And that is also how I learned that I'm terrible against people who actually play a lot.
This is true for just about everything you compete in. You become better than all your friends. You think the most awesome thing ever. You go to a club, and you're like, wow, I know nothing.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Or you go on the internet. This is true for computer games as well. It's like, I'm so good at StarCraft, I can make so many Marines. And then you go online and it's like, wow.
That is exactly my experience with StarCraft, actually.
Yes, indeed. Well, I'm covering up the lichess.org logo with my powers here. So I will make a move. I won't spend all the time talking. And then you go to a tournament and you learn all over again, because sometimes the club level is a bit below tournament level. So it's a nice shock. My first tournament was 6 rounds. I think I got 2 points out of 6. It was a lot harder than I expected. And that was many years ago. That was probably 15, 16 years ago. I've been playing a long time. So I like these moves from a general sense. You're bringing out your minor pieces. The knights and bishops are called the minor pieces.
Okay.
And the queen and rooks are the major pieces because they're much more valuable. So in the beginning of the game, you want to bring out your knights and bishops first because it's easy to bring them out, and they're not so valuable that they have to move out of the way if they get attacked. For example, if your knight is attacked by a bishop, you can just leave it there. You don't have to flee because it's worth about the same amount.
Okay. Okay, that's good.
And then another goal early in the game, you've probably figured this out by now, is to castle with your king to get that safe. And moving the knights and bishops helps you toward that goal as well.
Sure, yeah.
All right, very good move, very good. I'm going to go with the pin. Are you familiar with what a pin is?
Yes, I am.
You
yes.
should, because there's pin right in your name.
It is, yes. It totally is. But this name came a little before my chess career. So.
Is that so? You didn't know about the awesome pin. Well, there's two kinds of pins while we're talking about pins. This is called a relative pin, which means you can move the knight, but then I'll take your queen.
Right.
The absolute pin is where it's pinned to a king, where it's actually against the rules to move that piece. So you have to watch out with relative pins because your opponent could come up with some amazing tactic and move that piece unexpectedly, maybe with a check or with a threat to your king.
Okay.
But an absolute pin, there's nothing to worry about. It would be against the rules for him to move that piece. So there's nothing too concerning about this pin. You can just leave it on the board if you want. You don't have to do anything about it.
Okay.
But if you are uncomfortable with it, I'm sure you can find a move to weaken it.
Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and ask a question. At this point in time, I'm thinking about moving bishop to e2. Is that an accurate move to both help me develop and kind of reduce the power of that pin a little bit?
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. As you see, you've moved a knight and bishop so far, and you still need to get your other knight and bishop into the game somehow.
Right.
So the question is, where are you going to move this white squared bishop? C4 and B5, somewhere further down the line, are both under attack by pawns, so you would not move there. So that leaves two main options. E2 is just fine. D3 is fine as well. They're both good moves. Sometimes people feel like moving their bishop just one square isn't very much, but it's actually a really common thing to do in the opening, is just move it one square. Because it's off the back rank, it's out of the way, so then you can castle and get your rooks organized.
Okay, yeah. Then I guess I'll go ahead and go with it.
Very good, very good. And I will almost copy you with e6. So did you have to learn the notation over these past couple days as well?
Yes, I did. I did, definitely.
Yeah. I'm going to offer you a trade of bishops here.
Okay. Let's see. I'm going to assume that this would be good for me because the white bishop here is on I have a lot of pawns on dark squares here.
Amazing. How do you know about this concept? You're like a 2-day-old chess player and you know about the bad bishop?
Well, I've just been watching a ton of your videos. That was just mentioned there somewhere. So.
Yes, I do say that a lot of times on stream. So that's exactly right. The pawns that are on black make that a worse bishop. Now, because it's outside the pawn chain, it's not really blocked by the pawns.
That's true.
It's not so bad.
Okay.
But you would technically call that the bad bishop, but in this case, you wouldn't have to worry about it really, because there's useful things it could do. It could also shift over to pin the knight if it moved to g5. Now, I wouldn't recommend that move right there instead of trading, because you're just moving the bishop. I wouldn't do that pin just because you're moving the bishop again, and you'd rather do something useful with your move instead of moving the same piece over and over.
Sure. Okay.
But if the bishop were trapped back on d2 behind your pawn structure, I think we've lost him. I'll just make my move while I see if I can repair this. Hold on while we try to get the call back. Oh, technical difficulties. I think we've got him back. That's a nice tie.
Oh, hello?
Hello.
Oh, thank you. Yes, that is my tie.
Well, we're seeing the tie instead of you now. There we go. There. Hopefully, it's probably an internet connection issue.
Yes, I think...
Are you wired in through an Ethernet cable?
I am, but my wireless connection was trying to take over for some reason.
Okay.
So
it's always good to have a cause. I would rather have a terrible itch and know why than have half a terrible itch and just wonder why. I think that makes sense. So I was saying as you disappeared, if the bishop were behind the pawns on d2, then you would really feel bad about it because it would be completely trapped in.
Definitely. I do want to develop my knight to d2 here.
Very, very good move. I love how you're bringing your pieces out in the opening. Basically, one move per piece. You haven't wasted any time. The one move that maybe was a little bit worse of a use of time was c3, that one pawn move, one square.
Sure.
Just because it didn't help with your bringing anything out. I know you did it because you think I'm awesome and you wanted to copy me.
It seemed like such a nice little triangle we've got going here. It was so visually pleasing.
Yes. Yeah, but the opening is kind of like a race. You want to bring out your pieces as fast as possible before the opponent.
Oh, did I even let go of that? Oh, it doesn't matter. I was going to do that anyway.
Excellent. Excellent. Good move. And I'm just going to play my knight out. So now we're in a pretty balanced position here. So the next step in the game, after you've got your knights and bishops out, after you've castled, is to bring your rooks and queen to useful squares. Now in this position, there's nowhere roomy for the rooks. Oh, we lost them again. This is a disaster. No worries. My headset's going to fall out and we'll fix it. Don't even worry.
Why?
Welcome back, Necktie.
This is ridiculous. I don't even connect that time.
I'm going to recommend that you turn off the stream on your other device.
That's a good call.
That'll probably...
I'm not even watching. So.
That'll probably make more room for the bandwidth for this call. Maybe that'll work. So what was I saying? Oh yes, there's no room here for your rooks. All 8 pawns are still on the board. So when you're looking for where your rooks go, you want to look for where the pawns are not. How familiar are you with bringing your rooks out?
Well, I believe you want to bring them either to the center files, if there's no open files yet in the game, but if there are open files, then that's a better spot to put them.
Right. So in this position, certainly no open files, but you want to plan ahead about what files will be opening.
Okay.
So there's some possibilities of pawn breaks in the center. You could push e4 or c4, and I could push e5 or c5.
Okay.
And then that'll start getting the pawns moving, and the center could open up.
So I haven't, let's see, I want to move my queen here to allow my rooks to move into better attack the middle.
Yep. Yep. Just like with the bishops, anywhere off the back rank is somewhere more useful. So you could even go to c2, and that would be development just fine.
Sure.
Or you could go all the way out to a4, and I wouldn't complain about that. This move you played is nice because it hits my pawn that's not defended. So I have to do something about that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if you take it, I could move my rook over and skewer you. The pawn behind would be unguarded. But I don't think that's a great sequence for me, so I'm just going to push my pawn to help defend.
Okay.
Looks like you've got a pretty good grasp of the opening, probably from episode 30, Lessons on the Opening.
Yes. That was one of the first ones I watched, so I figured the opening is a great place to start when learning.
Yes, it is. But you don't have to memorize a lot of moves, though, as a beginner. You just want to get the general concepts, because there's a lot of other foundations to get in chess than just one sequence of moves. So you just want to find something you're comfortable with.
Okay, so here I'm looking for a file to place my A1 rook on.
Yep.
And I'm having a hard time deciding whether I want it on the C file or the D file. I think C file may be more beneficial once there starts being trades in the middle, because it will help defend that file. Is that true?
Well, the question is, are you going to open up the C file? If you push your C pawn up to C4, then the C file can open, and your rook being there would be very useful.
Okay.
If you don't plan to do that, if you plan on just waiting for me to push a pawn, then you might go to D1, which would be more passive because you're kind of waiting for me to take a stance in the center.
Okay, I think I will go ahead and go with that.
All right. Very good, very good. Your play so far has been quite solid.
Thank you. Now, I do want to push the C file. I'm sorry, I'm giving away all my terrible secrets.
That's all right.
But should I develop my other rook first to a better position before I start?
Well, it's hard to know what square to go to because you don't know what's going to happen next, right?
True.
And sometimes there's just one good file to use. Only one file opens up, and in that case, you would consider putting both rooks on that same file.
Doubling up.
Yeah, you play rook c2 and then your other rook behind. So at this point, doubling on c5 would be probably premature because you don't know if I'm going to play e5 and open the center. But it's something to keep in mind.
Okay.
So you could play c4 right now
Yeah,
to
that's
break
what
the center.
I think I'm going to go ahead and go for that.
And then I have to choose, do I want to trade or not? Or not? If I take, you might recapture with the knight, which is a really nice spot for your knight, forcing my queen to move. And then your control of e5 is very good. If I leave it there, I just have to wait. I could play e5 right now. This is very interesting for me, because the pawns suddenly become fluid. I'm going to do it just to give you a lot to think about. So now there's a lot of pawn captures possible. Now in a very fast game with a short time control, which is usually what's played on the internet, you would probably just play a capture very quickly because you just don't want to calculate. You don't have time to figure out everything that's going on. But in a high-level tournament or a game with a long time control, people will spend a lot of time in a position like this because there's so many options. And then they might make a move that doesn't deal with that pressure at all, like rook to d1, rook f to d1. Just because they've calculated, well, if he does this, I've got this plan. If he does this, I've got this plan. So this is where kind of play diverges based on just how much time you have to think about it.
Okay. I think I would like, well, you've got pretty similar situations with our knights here. So you have 2 defenders on d5, and I think you only have 1 defender. No, you have the queen as the defender. I feel like I'm short defenders here.
Well, I do have plenty of defense so that if you capture either of my pawns, I can capture back and be okay.
Yeah.
Your pawns, it's a simple matter to just count attackers and defenders, and if you've got an equal number, then you're okay. It's only if I exceed your number that I could end with 1 final capture and you don't have any way to counter that. So your 2 pawns, I just have pawns attacking them. Each of them just has 1 attacker. So you're not in danger of losing pawns here.
So would you recommend just not trying to capture these pawns, or I'm a little...
Yeah, it's up to you. At this point, probably capturing one of the pawns is the best move. What you have to think about here, and this is kind of a higher level thing, is what shape do you want the pawns to be in after the center tension is resolved? Are you familiar with the isolated pawn?
Yeah, yes, when there's not a pawn on either of the adjacent files.
Right. So there is a possibility, perhaps, to give me an isolated pawn, or for me to force you to have one if you don't respond. So you have to think, is that going to be a good thing for me or a bad thing for me?
Okay.
Now,
there's my move.
All right.
That's my move.
Okay. I don't actually want an isolated pawn.
Oh.
But I think I can avoid it. Trade, and now there's a discovered attack. That was kind of pinned, that knight.
Oh, of course it was.
Since I can slip behind. So right now you've taken 1 piece. So if I take your bishop, we've each taken a piece and a pawn. So it's even at that point. So let's calculate ahead. Let's calculate ahead in your mind. You just took a piece. If I play bishop takes bishop, then it's even. And it's your turn. So you want to save your rook. And so you'd play rook e1 to attack my bishop. Okay, what do you think I would do next?
Then you would just capture my knight with your queen, most likely.
Okay, so then I would be ahead a piece. And then your turn, you would have to capture my bishop with rook takes e2.
Right.
And then it would be even.
Oh, okay.
Right? Because we each got 1 piece. And then it's my turn, and I could take c4. Do you have enough defenders on c4?
You could take c4. I have 1 defender. I have 2 defenders on c4.
You actually have 3, which is plenty.
Oh, yep. I see.
So you'd be okay. So in that sequence, you'd be fine.
Okay.
What if, though, look ahead again, I take your bishop,
Okay.
you play rook e1, but then I save my bishop instead of taking your knight right away. What would happen then?
Well, you would have to save your bishop by going to h5.
Okay.
So I would probably try to escape with my knight.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of move would you make? Where do you think you'd go?
I think I would probably take my knight to d3. That seems like the only
okay.
safe spot.
And after those moves, would you be behind or would it be even again?
I would be behind.
By how much?
1 piece.
Ooh, well, a piece is a big amount. But by my calculation, you would not be.
Really?
Right.
This is crazy.
Yes, it's hard to calculate, but you've got to do this in order to play chess, because sometimes you just have to count everything.
Oh, wait, as it stands right now, I'm ahead. So
That's right.
My bishop, and then you escaping with the bishop would make us even.
Yes, exactly. You're ahead because you took a piece on e5. Right. And then we stopped after that to start analyzing. So we're already kind of imbalanced.
Okay.
What about if when saving my bishop, instead of going to h5, what if I went to c4, taking your pawn? Would I end up ahead of pawn?
Went to c4 with your...
With my bishop. I take your bishop on e2, and then I head out in the other direction.
Well, then I suppose you would be ahead of pawn.
Well, do you have enough defenders to recapture?
I do, but you have a pawn there that would take out... Well, yeah, I do, because there's only one attacker, so that would be 2 attackers. Well, I have 3 defenders.
Okay, so what move would you play in that case?
In that case, I'd probably take the knight to c4, because it's the least valuable of those.
Yes, but which knight would you use?
Oh!
I shocked you! Earthquake!
Well, I think I would want to use the knight on the e file currently.
Yes.
It's already in an awkward position.
Exactly. It's in danger. So here are the moves we're looking at. It is bishop takes e2, rook e1, bishop takes c4, knight takes c4, and then I would play pawn takes c4, and then you would recapture one more time.
Right.
What do you think you'd use, your other knight?
Yes, that way I'd be attacking your queen.
Yes, and that knight would have a nice square there on c4. So then would we be even, or would I have gotten ahead?
I think we'd be even. But
let's see. Your bishop would die. Your knight on e5 would die.
I would take a pawn and a bishop. You would take my bishop and... Oh, so you'd be ahead. You would still be ahead? Or am I just...
Well, I've drawn it on the screen, but you can't see it. All the viewers can see
it.
So I would lose my bishop.
Right.
And I would lose my d5 pawn.
But I would lose a bishop, a knight, and a pawn.
And your c4 pawn. So you would end up losing that knight, which brings us back to even.
Oh, right. I'm ahead.
That's right. So you would actually be okay there.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to go for it. This is actually what you would have to calculate before playing knight takes e5. Before you came down there, because you say, well, this is kind of pinned. There's a bishop behind there. So what happens if he takes the bishop and then takes my knight? What happens if he takes the bishop and then runs with the bishop? There's a couple of different things you have to look ahead to see. Okay, so I'm going for it. Now we see if we analyze correctly. Couldn't have been better? So whose position do you like better here?
Well, I do not. No.
You do not know.
I, I think both positions have merit to them.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like neither of our rooks are in. They're not in active positions at the moment. They can be active.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I feel as though my knight is a little better placed. However, it is pinned at the moment.
Well, it's actually not technically pinned. If it has to move, it can. Because your queen is protected, so it would just be a trade.
That's true. Okay.
So what about rooks? Whose rooks are more active?
I think
Do you see a difference?
I think mine are because my rook on c1, if I move the knight, can. Well,
yeah, I agree. I think that's the right line of reasoning. You're on an open file from your perspective because you don't have any pawns on it. My rook is on a closed file from my perspective because it's blocked by my own pawn. So that's, in a sense, you're attacking because your rook is attacking c6, and I'm defending.
okay.
In any game of chess, you want to be the attacking player just because you've got more mobility.
Okay.
But especially in a rook game, like a rook endgame, it's really important for your rooks to be active because there's such a difference between an attacking rook hitting some pawns and a defending rook that's just blocked in. So those two rooks there on c1 and c8, that's a big difference there.
Okay.
It might not come out to anything, though, because there's a D file that's open to both of us, and we both want to use that file.
So I think my move here is to move my rook to that D file to make that active, so you can't directly move your rook to that.
Yes, well, I still can, and I'm considering it now.
Right, because that would be a trade. Right?
Yep, that would just be a trade. What do you think about the pawns in this position?
Well, the pawns, we both have pawns on the F, G, and H files that are protecting our kings, which is good.
Yep.
It seems to me that you have a little more room back there to maneuver because of the pawns you have on the 6th rank. Or would that be the 3rd rank for you?
Yeah, you could think of it as your 6th. I have 2 pawns advanced, so that gives me a bit more space there on the queen side.
Okay.
The thing that jumps out to me about these pawns, which is something you haven't mentioned, is the concept of a pawn majority. Have you heard of that term?
I've heard of it. I'm not sure what it is.
So a pawn majority is where when your pawns are facing his pawns, like across the board, your A2 and B2 are across the board from my 3 here. If the opponent has more pawns than you, then he has a pawn majority. It makes sense. He's got more, so that's a majority.
Sure.
The reason that's important is getting down to the very end of the game, if some of those pawns trade and get pushed, at the end, the opponent will have a passed pawn that could threaten to become a queen.
Okay.
So I have a pawn majority on the queen side because 3 pawns against 2. And you have a pawn majority on the king side.
4 against 3.
Yes. Now, the rule of thumb for pawn majorities is it's slightly better to have it on the queen side, just because players usually castle on the king side, so their kings are off on one side of the board. So it becomes a little bit harder to get over there to stop a pawn on the other side. Now, we're talking way into the future because there's a lot of other pieces on the board here. But I do like my queen side pawn majority.
Okay.
Now, as pieces start to come off the board, you want to start thinking about the pawn majority and how to threaten to promote. So you'd want to use your E and F pawns to advance down the board as well, because those two together can get past my single F pawn because they're a pawn majority.
Okay. So, would I want to start pushing that now, or should I? I'm considering the trade with the rooks. I know that you want to trade when you're ahead, but we're even at the moment.
That's right.
And then the other time you want to trade is to make room when you have a little less space, but I think that that's more in the development stage. Is that true?
Well, it's a good general rule of thumb. It's often when you're defending that you need trades because that gets rid of the attacking pieces on the board.
Oh,
and if you're really cramped so your pieces are tripping over each other, then trades would really help that out. In this position, you're not cramped at all. In fact, arguably, you have the more space here because you have a center pawn, the E3 pawn, and I don't have any pawns in the center. So you have a good control of the center here. At least as good. So you don't have less space here.
So what about a move of my knight to D6? I like that because it threatens your rook. And then what that would ultimately do is if you, I believe you would end up losing a queen, unless you ran from that.
Not a good move.
No?
No.
Oh, because I would take that then.
Yes, d6 is attacked by 2 of my pieces.
That's true.
So it looks like I could take it. I'd have to take it carefully, but I could take it.
I had my queen visually on a different spot.
I see. So since you're playing someone super amazing like ChessViz, you would think, oh, I need to trade rooks to make it simpler, because when you're playing a strong player, trades can help simplify to an endgame where you're not going to get crushed. But that would be a mistake here, I think, because if you take my rook and I capture back, I'm the one that takes that fully open file. Whoever initiates that trade is giving up that file.
Okay.
So you wouldn't want to rush to do that. And this is a mistake that a lot of players will make in fast games is, I just need to make any move quick, so a trade, and that'll be useful. He's forced to reply. So they just make trades too quickly. But trades can often be a disadvantage, like in this case.
Okay. In that case, yeah, I'm not totally sure what to, I have no idea what to move here. Do I want to start moving my f-pawn forward, start pushing that?
Yeah, it's hard to find a plan because all your pieces are on good squares.
Right.
One good approach is to find a piece that's not participating very well and to bring it in to be more participatory. But in this case, your knight on c4 is very active, your queen's on a fine square, and both your rooks are doing well. So what do you improve? Well, you have 2 possible plans. One is to use your f-pawn, like you said, to take a little more space in the center. You could play f3 and e4. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And another possibility is to start trying to break down my queen side with what's called a minority attack. Because you have a pawn minority, if your pawns start coming into my pawns, I could be left with a pawn that I have to defend with pieces, as opposed to with pawns. So that could put me on the defensive. So you could play pawn to a4, and then pawn to a5, which puts the question to my pawns. I might end up with a weakness there that you could start targeting.
Okay, I like that. I like the minority attack.
All right, so now do I want to trade rooks? No, for the same reason. I don't want to give up that d file. I want to bring my knight to a nice square, considering d5 and e4. I guess I'll try this move. Can't be too harmful.
So I think I'd like to continue with the minority attack.
Okay. So now I'm faced with a choice. If I capture you, my pawns are separated. I have 2 isolated pawns, which is quite weak. If I leave it there and you capture, I have to be very careful not to lose that pawn entirely. If you count your attackers here, you've got a pawn, knight, and queen. That's 3 attackers. So I need at least 3 defenders to be sure not to just lose that pawn for free. My last choice is to push that pawn, which I'm considering just to relieve the pressure. So you should be thinking, if I push, what are you going to do with your knight? Oh, now we'll find out.
Oh, is it ready? Okay. Well, yeah, that's a bit uncomfortable.
It's hard to find. Yeah, c4 was a nice square. It's hard to find another nice square. If you could just fly it to any square, where would you move it to? If you could just teleport it.
Well, that's a lot of power.
You only get 1 flight. You can't fly your other pieces.
I'd probably like to, oh, maybe perhaps, I don't know, that's crazy. I like the idea of attacking the queen somewhere like g5, but I would also perhaps want to weaken your rooks by putting it on b7.
Those are some pretty crazy flights. Yeah, you have to think about, after you fly your knight, then it's my turn. So if you're just attacking a rook or a queen, I could just move that piece.
Sure.
And then if it's just 1 threat, then it's come to nothing. So for example, if you flew to g5, and I just save my queen with like queen f6, for example, then you've got to move your knight again.
Yeah, it would be kind of worthless.
That wasn't an amazing flight after all. And b7, well, after I move my rook, what's the next spot? Because it's going to be, it's too deep in enemy territory. The reason I asked this question, it's actually a useful question. It's because knights really like to find good squares and just stay there while emanating their power over the board. So here on c4, that knight was really strong, hitting some useful squares. Now it has to move, but there are other good options for squares here that you could maneuver into. And g5's not one of them, though, because it's too unstable. I could attack it with a pawn pretty easily.
I like the f4 square, which is kind of the mirror, but you're attacking that with your knight. So obviously I wouldn't want to teleport there. But
one of the things you should look at is what pawns can drive it away from that square. Because knights really like an outpost where no pawns can chase them away.
So if I just pushed a pawn up to e4, then it could drive it away?
If you pushed your pawn to e4, my knight could theoretically be driven away.
Okay.
Now, in reality, I would be able to capture that pawn, so my knight could stay there. But that means that my knight on d5 is not in the perfect outpost that can never be driven away. So I just have to keep that in mind, how things could be changing over time.
So I think that right now, probably, well, I could push it off to a3, but that feels a bit disconnected from the rest of the game.
Yeah, it's knights are so slow because they move only what's nearby that it's really tough when they get towards the side of the board and toward the corner.
So I think that d2 is where I want to move it for now, because that'll make it safe, and then I can move it towards other more useful spots.
Yeah, d2 makes sense as the next square for it to go. The imaginary question I was asking you about what square you'd want to fly to is important because after d2 you want to think about where you're headed next. You want to make kind of a longer term plan for the knight because d2 isn't its final resting place.
No, definitely not.
So the square I was hoping you'd answer with is is c5, one square up.
That's
the correct answer, so to speak, because it can't be driven away by a pawn. Okay, and d4 is another great square, but it can be driven away by a pawn.
Okay, so in trying to move in that direction, I want to move my knight probably. I feel like d2 is still the best move for now, but I would want to attempt to maneuver it back to d4 or c5.
Yep. Now, it turns out I know that your plan is to go to c5, so I'm going to do everything I can to stop making it a great square for you. So my goal is to push my pawn to c5. Okay. If I can do that, then my pawns don't have that weakness anymore. I don't have that hole, and I'm controlling the center much better. So in reality, in this position, it's probably not going to matter. I'm going to get c5 played. But it's useful to think about in positions like this in your future games, because if you can find a hole where you can sink that knight, that could be really powerful.
Okay.
Okay. Now I can't play c5 right now because that c-pawn is defending b5. So I'll hold b5 from the other side.
Now, in this case, is the best thing. I would assume that a good thing to do in this situation would be to continue to keep my knight active. So, moving him perhaps to f3, I feel like is a position that is better than where he's currently at, that is non-threatened.
Yep, knight f3 makes a lot of sense to bring that knight back into the game. There is one thing to consider, which is what we've talked about with my playing c5. You could focus on that and think about how can you stop me from playing c5? Because if you can prevent that and keep that as a hole in my position, then you can do that maneuvering later. Because if you think ahead, after you play knight f3, I'll probably play c5 if I can.
I could just kind of shove my rook into that spot there, couldn't I?
It's an interesting idea. Yep, you could.
Yeah. Okay. well, I really didn't mean to do that. I was just kind of playing with it, but
Oh, it was you're holding it out with your mouse?
but now I already committed. It's my move officially.
So yes, it's definitely not a good idea to pick up your piece with your mouse if you haven't made your decision. Hover it over that square while you're thinking about it. I had a friend who played over the board who would pick up his piece, put it on the square, and then just hold one finger on it and be like, how does this look? Oh, look at it from all angles. That's not real good manners in a game of chess.
It seems a bit kind of bit rude.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so this is what's called a backward pawn, the c6 pawn, and it's really valuable for you to force it to stay back here because no pawns can defend it. I have to defend it with my pieces, so that gives me that weakness. So now c6 is a weak pawn, and you could pile up on it, attack it as much as you want, and all I can do is defend. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, it does. I'm trying to figure out how to exploit that.
That's right. I'm going to mix things up because I don't like my pawn just being a weakness forever.
Okay.
The move I've made is arguably bad because if you trade queens, I will have another isolated weak pawn.
I'm always a bit wary to trade queens, of course, but in this case, it seems strategically apt to do so. So yeah, I feel like that is a...
What do you think a downside could be of trading?
Well, I lose my queen, and also I think I lose a little less attacking power on my queen side.
Yep, the funny thing about this structure, because we're going toward an endgame, is it could be all about the weak pawns. If I have weak pawns that I'm trying to defend, that could be your winning edge. So trading could give me weaker pawns. It's also about piece activity. Your knight now on d2 could end up pinned to your rook on d1. Because if you move the knight, I just take that rook. So that could be a tactical problem that causes you to have to take a few moves to untangle. Now, you mentioned if I trade queens, I lose my queen. That's something that you should not even worry about. Because if you trade queens, I lose my queen.
That's very true.
So people, when they start out, often have a fear of trading or a highly valuing trading incorrectly. The last lesson I gave, the guy just really loved trades. He just thought anytime he traded, that was good for him. And sometimes people think anytime I trade, it's bad for me. But it's neither one. It just depends on what else is going on.
Okay. I'm really stuck. I do, I kind of fancy the concept of just shoving my pawn f3, just kind of throw it off a bit because here, oh, well, if you push that, then I'll lose my rook, so no, that didn't.
Well, there's a danger right now with the queens attacking each other.
Right.
If I take your queen, your only way to recapture is with a piece that's pinned.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel maybe in this case the best situation would just be to trade queens. So
Yes, I think that's good.
I can effectively do it on my turn.
But you want to plan ahead. Is this pin going to be a problem? This pin down on d2, d1.
I am worried about that pin.
You'll have to plan. What you should do actually before you take queens is plan out your next move because you know I'm going to capture back.
Right.
So think about what you'll do next and do you like that position. If you can't find anything good, well then you don't have to trade queens. So it's difficult. I'm threatening knight e4. Which hits your rook and hits your pinned knight, which you can't capture, or I get your other rook. So there's definitely some concerns.
So I feel like I want to move my rook, but in that case, it seems like you kind of get a free knight out of that with your rook on the
Yes,
same file.
you can't consider anything that gives me a free knight.
Okay.
That would be, if you're familiar with basketball, it would be like being down 25 points. It's just a huge problem.
I think I want to do this so that you can't threaten e4.
I like that. Now you're familiar with, in the end game, you want to bring your king out. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay, so this is starting to look like an end game. As soon as the threat of checkmate is passed, that's when you want to bring it out. It's like a race like the opening to bring your king out at the right time. And the right time is just about here. Another thing about the right time is if your king were on e2, that would no longer be a pin.
That's what I was thinking about, is that I want to move my king over that away.
Yes.
Too.
But time is running out because this pin is going to get worse and worse.
That's scary all of a sudden. So I think I definitely want to move my king over that way.
Oh, well, let me give you a take back on that move. Propose a take back.
Then apparently
Go ahead and take that take back. Because my rook is attacking another piece of yours, a pawn to be technically correct. And so you've got a better king move than king f1. Why not more toward the center?
What is happening?
Is my audio choppy?
Oh, okay. I think I lost you for a second.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Did you catch what I said about moving toward the center?
Oh, no, I just heard that you're threatening the pawn on e3.
Yes. So what I said after that, which was the packets were dropped, is because you're bringing your king out, go out all the way. There's no reason not to go completely toward the center here.
Oh, so just go f2.
Yep. Yep. It's just strictly better than f1 in every way.
Right.
They're both toward the middle, but it
protects
that pawn.
Okay, sure.
But I'm going to put the pressure on that knight. So now we see this is the kind of position that you'd actually want to look ahead to when you're thinking about trading queens. All the way back there when you're saying, I take your queen, he takes mine. Now I've got a knight under attack. What if I, pawn to f3, king to f2? Is that good enough? You want to have that kind of position in your mind so that you can make sure you don't lose this knight.
Okay. I really don't want to relinquish my pressure on that pawn of yours on c6. But I'm worried that I'm going to need it as an extra defender.
Yep, that's a good line of thinking. If you do pull that rook back, still pushing the pawn. I mean, you could take that pawn right now. I've kind of given it up by moving over.
Right.
So blocking the pawn from moving isn't as important as what happens to the rook. And what happens to the pawn, I guess. What my move has done is to say the pawn is not as important. I would rather have an active rook. Now, I'm threatening your knight right now, so I guess it's immediately obvious. But this is something you can use in other endgames with rooks as well. Sometimes it's best to just give up a pawn if it turns a really bad rook into a really good rook. Because rook activity is really important.
So as I am attempting to look ahead here, if I play my rook down to c2, then you could trade. We would trade rooks, and you would get my knight.
Well, if you play rook to c2, I don't have to take your knight.
Sure, right. Hopefully it would deter you from doing so.
In fact, I think it would, because I have two attackers, right? And you have two defenders.
Right.
So it's fully defended. So if I took that, it would be like trading a rook for a knight, which is a disadvantage.
Okay. So yeah, I think that's probably the best move.
Okay. So your knight is fully protected, but still pinned.
Right. I think that's what I want to do. So
That's a great move.
Get you out of there.
But I found the time to get my backwards pawn into a strong pawn.
That's unfortunate.
Just enough time. So it turns out that that pin was useful. You could have played king e2 instead of rook c2. And that would hold the knight as well and keep that pawn from advancing.
Keep that pawn from being silly. Okay.
So now my queenside's pretty strong looking. You still have a tactical challenge because you can't move the knight still.
I think I want to move my pawn up to b3.
Oh. What if I took it?
If you took that pawn, then I would not be able to take that rook. Okay.
Well, if I took with the rook, well, that's interesting. Pawn up. Let me draw on the screen for the viewers. Pawn up. Rook takes. Okay. Then if you take with knight, then pawn takes. I think you're okay.
Yeah, and then I take your rook with my rook on the d file.
Well, I would throw in a rook trade first.
That would make more sense, and then I take it with my king.
Yes, and then
so that makes it the trade.
And then pawn trade. Pawn takes b3. And in the end, you got my rook. You'd be left with the rook on c2 still, and I would have lost both rooks. But what if I captured with the pawn instead of with the rook on b3?
Yeah, then I really still couldn't capture back with the knight.
Yeah, your knight would still be pinned. So that's the way I would capture.
So that's looking like a less fantastic move.
Yes, it has actually a larger problem. Instead of capturing, I could push my pawn to c3.
Oh, yes.
Hitting that knight, which can't move, protected by my rook, so it can't be captured either. That would immediately win material through that tactic. So it's coming out of just this pin. You're very tied up because of the pin. It's hard to untangle. So I think your first order of business should be, how can I move this knight? Find a way to get that knight movable so that you don't stay tangled up for the rest of the game.
Do I want... maybe push my... do I just want to move my rook on d1?
Well,
that's on a really nice file. So.
Well, it's really my file. That's an interesting idea. So you'd probably move it to c1, right?
Right.
So, and then I can't win your knight for free. You still have two defenders. And then you could move the knight. So that works.
Okay.
Another approach you could do is move your c2 rook back to c1, which puts enough defenders on that rook that the knight could move. And that would stay challenging the d file. So the benefit of moving in the one direction is you get out of the way right away. But the other way, you keep the file challenged.
Okay, then that's good. That's good to look at both those.
Okay, so I want to find a way to put even more pressure on you. But I don't think I see a way. If I could suddenly attack that knight with my knight, maybe, but I can't. I can't check you. Considering rook takes e3, quickly seeing that rook takes e3 is drowned out by your loud chair and doesn't do anything. Your chair is actually louder than my voice right now.
I believe it. I'm trying to hold still.
I think I have nothing better than to just start bringing my king in as well.
Okay.
So you've successfully rescued your position.
So now I can move my knight out of here safely. And that would be either b1 or f1, and I feel like f1 is just a better...
Yeah, a little bit better. You also could go to e4, but if you look a little bit, you'll see how that really ruins your pawns.
Yeah, with the doubled up isolated pawn on the e file.
Yep.
Okay.
That would be a classic, if you can imagine the pawn structure after that. It would be a classic advantage for me.
Yeah,
because I have pawn majority on queenside, but your counter majority is almost useless. You can't break through to make a pawn into a passed pawn.
So then this is definitely the better move.
Yep, I think so.
I have no idea why my chair is so loud.
World's loudest chair. You should get a prize.
Seriously. It's awful.
So I did not trade. I would rather just continue to hold this file.
So I could directly... Okay. Here are the options that I'm seeing right now. I could push up my e pawn to try and get a little more of an attack on that side. Perhaps then you go with the knight I capture with... I end up with an isolated pawn.
Well, I don't think I'd want to trade my knight for a pawn.
No, probably not.
No, knights are quite a bit better.
What can't you just do what I think you're gonna do in my head? And if that's, of course, you wouldn't take that. So I have that pushed up, and then I do have a nice defensive row of pawns, which is good. The other option I think would be to push my rook up to c3, because perhaps I want to challenge that. I capture. You go up. You could capture that.
Yeah, you recall you played rook c1 in order to put 2 defenders on your rook on d1.
Yeah.
So you can't move off right now or you'll lose that rook.
Yeah,
but there's a more fundamental thing that will come with practice, which is you can't really force a trade by chasing the opponent around. You're thinking rook c3 to trade rooks because maybe I'll take you. But what I could do, well, I could take your rook on d1 for free, but ignoring that, I could pull back, for example, to d7, d6, d5, somewhere there. And that after that exchange, you haven't gained anything. So this is something that beginners fall into. They think, I need to trade such and such a piece, so they attack it. Well, then it moves, and then they attack it, and then it moves. And pretty soon they haven't been working toward any plan because it just moves out of the way. So the way to get a trade, if the opponent has a strong piece, is actually to make your pieces stronger so that they want to trade. So instead of chasing around my strongest piece, you want to make your pieces as strong as they can be so that I'm willing to trade my pieces for yours.
Okay.
So that's on a more fundamental level. In this specific position, rook c3 makes no sense. You would just lose your rook. But you could apply this rule to other positions where the opponent has strong active pieces. You'll often make more progress making your own pieces active than just chasing their pieces around. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. We're kind of close to the top of the hour. So let's just play a couple more moves, 1 or 2 more moves here.
All right, then I'll just push him up there.
Very good, very good. And now your knight can pull in a little bit more. Nice. I really liked knight e3, the square that you opened up for your pawn, because then it could sink into d5, which is a hole.
Yeah.
You see that?
Would have been. Yes.
So f5, now at your level, you might see d5 and f5 and think of them as, well, pretty similar squares because they're both advanced. They're both protected by a pawn. But you'll start to realize this more as you play more. The square that can't be chased away by a pawn is much stronger.
This one can, yes.
Right, because I could play g6 and chase it away. And that doesn't mean I have to. Just having the option makes it not as good. In this specific position, again, my knight is hitting d5, so you can't just jump into d5. But it's more of a rule of thumb to consider. If you've got 2 outposts for your knight, but one of them can't be chased away by a pawn, that's going to be a nice strong one.
Okay.
All right, so this has been free lesson episode, Chessmas TV. Did you enjoy?
I did. I really did. I learned quite a bit. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, I hope to see you around on mychess.org. I think we'll have a lot of fun. Perhaps we'll get to play again sometime.
I hope not. That would be awful.
No, I think it would be great. You did great here. You brought out your pieces really well. I think you kept up really, really well.
Thank you. I really appreciate your help and the free lesson, of course.
Cool. Well, I hope you stick around. Welcome to chess.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Do you have any last words for the viewers before you go?
No, I just, well, other than I hope that maybe, I know that I'm a total beginner, and perhaps there is another beginner out there. I haven't really looked at the chat, but I hope that you learned something or at least got some form of entertainment out of this episode. So
yeah, I think so. I actually checked the viewer counts, and they're just as high as ever. I think people were
fantastic.
They were really glad to have some beginner level stuff because a lot of Chessmas TV just moves so fast that it's really hard to keep up. So it's kind of nice to take a deep breath and watch the pieces move at a normal pace.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate that opportunity.
It was a pleasure. I'll see you next time.
All right. Talk to you later.
All right, guys. This has been Chessmas TV. Next episode is episode 57, I believe. We're doing Fun Day Monday, which is King of the Hill. Bring out your king in the opening. So the goal here is to play the King of the Hill variant on lichess.org. which is if you get your king to the 4 center squares, you win. The best strategy in that variant is not to bring your king out on the second move, because it actually just gets checkmated. But in this Fun Day Monday challenge, you're going to do that. So play games where you're playing King of the Hill, play e4, King e2, or something crazy like that, and send me those game recordings. We're going to go over some of those on Tuesday and laugh at you. And then I'll take the challenge myself, because it's the new thing we do on Fun Day Monday. Next week, which is a week from today, we are doing a simultaneous exhibition. If you want to sign up for that, go to the ChessWiz TV team on lichess.org. I'm not going to show you because we're out of time, and hey, just ask in the forums, you'll find it. So we're going to play multiple games at once next week. I'm going to play against a wide variety of viewers. It's just going to be fun. Please don't use computer assistants in your games. That makes it no fun for anybody. Last simul, I fought a bunch of AIs and lost to them. It was no fun at all. Oh, but I did win a few games. Plus Thibaut, the creator of lichess.org, got a draw against me. So that was pretty fun for him. Yeah, it's nice. All right, well, thank you for watching, guys. I will see you next time.